an area where maybe we didn't have the strongest forwards. So as a standoff, then you don't have the opportunity to to show your skills. So, but what I did then, I was a good trainer. I always trained hard, and I enjoyed my training, enjoyed my fitness, and then I just kept on. I trained a lot with Phil Bennett down in the track in the track. So what I did then was Nice gave me a call, and then Phil Bennett had rung them, and then from playing for my little village, playing standard for my village, I was then thrust into first class rugby, played for Nice, and then 30 games later, I'm playing for Wales.
Of seeing new places, having great memories, and for me, it's then at that stage, Bismarck du Plessis was in front of me, and John Smith, and let's be honest, South Africans like to pick big players. I'm not really in that mold or that category, and I'd like to play in a way that isn't typical South African. And now you get smaller players like Chris and Colby that is amazing, and they get the opportunity not because of size but just of skill set. And that stage I phoned Peter, he wasn't too phased about that, and for me I knew there might be, I would have probably, I don't know, I would never know if I would have played more test matches being in South Africa. But for me it was, okay, I've done the separated tour so many times. I've seen all the same places. And myself and then my girlfriend, now my wife, wanted to have a different experience. And the idea was then to go to France and sort of prove a point that even when the game gets tough and tight, then I can still flourish from that perspective. And then a guy called Brendan Fenter, that was then my coach, the Stormers, got offered a job or took a job at Saracens. And Johan Rupert, a guy that owns Remgo or Greynet or Richmond, he bought half of Nigel's share and with Dominic Sylvester, and that led me to Saracens. And Brendan Fenton, Edward Gifford sort of solved the vision of, we're just going to make memories, we're going to have lots of fun. You're only going to play, out of every 5 games, you're going to be like start maybe 2 on the bench, 2 and have a week off, and then you can go see Europe. And for me it's easier for my wife to sort of make the transition to law, English law. And for me it was always the thought then, okay fine, let's go and experience something new and see Europe. And that's how I ended up at Saracens. The plan wasn't really to stay in London for so long. For me it was I was 29, 28, I thought I had maybe 2 or 3 years left. Let's go see Europe. I'm getting paid to go to England, and it turned out to be the best, probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. It was, my kids were born in London, my wife still works in
Auckland, so I had already done a good chunk of study. I wasn't planning on rugby being a career when I left school. I was ready to pack up and go overseas. But then I sort of got into, did a Bachelor of PE at Auckland University in the teaching degree, and thought, hey, maybe I'll just smash this out first. Then rugby came on and took over, and it wasn't until I was about 22, 23 that it actually became serious. But being in the game so long, I was part of the first Professional Development Players Association program in New Zealand, which was run as a pilot through the Blues when I was there, and I managed to do a diploma in business through Auckland University as well in my time. I did that along with 6 other players, so I always knew that I needed something. I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be. Have any of those qualifications made use for me in life after rugby? I don't know, maybe not, but it's still something that I did complete, and I was probably better off for it. So, I'm a firm believer that professional rugby players need a positive distraction, and I call it that because it can be family and kids, it can be being the best parent you can be, it could be business, study.
I met with Rob Andrew to go to Newcastle, and they had these discussions, and once Saracens came in, and as I mentioned earlier, I guess I was really interested in still working and basically working in investment banking and going into that and merge both careers. It didn't work out, but at that time that was my idea, and I thought London was best. And when Saracens, and once I heard the likes of Michael Lynham, especially who's become a great mate of mine over the years, Philippe Delon, was going to Saracens, I think that sold it to me, and the vision that they had. And it's amazing. It was a toss of the coin where I might go, and it wasn't about who's paying the most money. It was just about the holistic, what's going to be best for my rugby, etc. Where would I like to live? And then, as it happened, Richard was, I suppose, London Irish would have been the natural home for me to go to, but Gary Halpin, the great late Gary Halpin, what a great man Gary was. He was captain of London Irish at the time, playing the same position, so it made no sense for me to go there. Otherwise, I probably would have, because it was about 7 or 8 of the Irish team and had a very good time. I think coming off the pitch. There's a very enjoyable culture there, and
a lot of teams. I am from the north of Argentina. My province is a small province with, in that moment, we had like 3 or 4 clubs, only 3 or 4 clubs. And but next to our place, to my place, there is this place called Tucumán, which is a very well-known place for rugby. And but to be honest, my town, it wasn't like a rugby town, you know. But our club, it was a very passionate club. My family, my father, I played with my father and my brother in the same team. We played together. This is a very good memory. And then my cousins, uncles, and friends, we had a very passionate team and club. I grew up there since I was a little kid. I don't know, 4 years old or 5 years old, and I was like running with the ball since then.
Many football clubs in France, plus the privilege to play for the national side. So lots of strong memories. Every single time, like everywhere in the world, when we meet former players. We were part of the same group. We keep talking about our games for sure, parties as well, and the way we managed to get together to create a special culture, mostly at Stade Français, which was an amazing part of my career, with an amazing chairman, Max Guazzini, amazing player as well. And I'm now in charge of the arrogance and the young ego in me more than anything, just because I was probably a bit more embarrassed than anything. Going from starting 10 tests in 2005 to not even getting in a wider training squad. So probably more embarrassment, and then try to hide your embarrassment by getting angry or pointing the finger at someone else. But then, I think as the course of that 2006 went on, I think it became pretty evident that the only one to blame really was, for the situation was me. I had areas in my game that I needed to work on, and I took it off. And as a consequence, I didn't find myself getting the rewards that I felt. I felt like I probably deserved them naively rather than earned them. So I needed to go away and earn them.
That team, and just so happened that Canterbury under-19 B team played New Zealand under-21 in a trial game, because the New Zealand under-21 team were getting ready for a tour. And I had 3 tries in that game. I got a couple of turnovers, and the New Zealand under-21 coach said, I want that kid to come to trial next year. And Canterbury said, no, we've got our 18, we've got 2 other athletes that are good to go. And he said, no, I want this kid to go. And so, to cut a kind of long story short, I went to this under-21 trial out of the under-19Bs. I made the New Zealand under-21s, played really well for them. At the end of that campaign, I made the Canterbury team because I played well in this New Zealand setup. At the end of that Canterbury campaign, I made the Crusaders. And at the end of the Crusaders campaign, I made the All Blacks. So, literally within 12 months of me sitting on the side of the road going, what am I going to do here? 12 or sort of 15 months later, I was running out at Twickenham in front of a sellout versus England in my debut. And so that's the thing I like to talk to kids about in particular, young people, kind of all about how you kind of bounce and really and trust the situations. What kind of decisions are you going to make when things aren't going your way? And I think that kind of what ultimately sort of defines you and defines what you kind of end up achieving a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of my story of Harry.
They beat, I think it was Northampton comfortably in the finals at Twickenham. So I joined the club on a high. But yes, for years, I think for about 10 years that I was there, I think 8 of those years we were fighting the bottom of the table. Probably not relegation, but we were always at the bottom. So at the start of the year was, can we finish any higher than 8th or 7th, trying to get into the Heineken Cup, Champions Cup.
16s and 15s, like national, even ACT teams I wasn't playing, ACT being the region where I was living. So I wasn't even in our state teams. Then it was just in that final year, when I was in year 12, which is the final year in Australia, that I got picked in the ACT team, the ACT schools team, competed in the nationals, then got picked in Australia A, which isn't the main squad, it's the kind of feeder underneath team. We actually played Ireland in that, and I think we lost about 60. It was a shocking score actually. We got flogged by Ireland. So
years when I was dreaming about rugby, we didn't have the British Lions come to New Zealand. It was obviously a big part of the fact that the rugby, so you know about it. But you know, I wouldn't put it as the one thing that at the top of the pile. It was more for me. You know, those formative years were during the Leguizamon World Cup games. So Australia was our biggest rival. We were, we were losing as much as we were winning. And I also grew up during the period where we were playing South Africa. So that was one interesting. So that rivalry sort of developed a little bit later in life, and it wasn't a dream of mine.
It's even more because the performance of the team is on your shoulders, and you got to find ways where you help your teammates to perform better, whether they need a hug or an arm around the shoulders, or they need a push. So I always embrace the challenge. Obviously when I was young, probably I wasn't that ready, and I learned my lessons as well throughout my career. But I always embrace the challenge, always embrace against the best teams, always embrace the pressure to be captain of my Italian side, because
getting forward, the last year tools is right, that you start picking up all the attributes of being a rugby player, tackling and catching all that sort of stuff. And it wasn't until the sixth form that I really blossomed as a rugby player, really. And it was then when a new coach just come in. He played in the Colts, but damaged his shoulder, so he couldn't play rugby again. But he became a PE teacher, and he became our first 16 coach. And so he was only probably about 4 or 5 years older than us, so he was sort of, of a very young generation. And it was him who mentioned, I think it was sort of like between lower 6 and upper 6 when we had a sort of
18, 19, lucky enough to play with the likes of Andy Farrell, Martin Afire, Jason Robinson, Twigger Marler, but when you're playing with such a great team, it means the competition to get in that team is very, very hard, and especially for a teenager. So I got to, I think I just turned 20, and then Sale Sharks came in. This is 96. And I'd actually agreed terms to go to Sale Sharks in 96. A bit of story to that is we all agreed contract terms, the lot, and then I got a phone call about a week later off my agent to tell me the deal had fell through because he went back and asked for more money against I think South Africa. We played them in the opening game. They focused that whole off-season on how they were going to beat us in the opening game of the World Cup. We had this broad focus, and they had this very narrow, very specific focus, and they were ready for everything that we turned on in that game. I mean, it wasn't a big loss on the scoreboard, but we were a mile apart in that game because they were so technically expert in the way that they approached the play the game and the way they took us on. And
and we never really caught up from there, which was disappointing. We got knocked out just by England in the quarter-final, but that was a really tough day. I think I often say one of the toughest days in my whole career.
Which is ironically the perfect professional structure for when the game did go professional. But ambition never led on. It was always the next step. You always wanted to play the best game you could play and what you were playing in. And if there was another step to take, you wanted to take that step and get up there. So initially it was obviously, get on the senior club team. Then it was get up to Leinster, and then it started representing rugby and all the underage stuff and the college.
Educational point of view, and that would always be my advice to kids growing up now as well and wanting to pursue a professional sporting career is to make sure that you have something behind your name and make sure that your education is on a high level as well. So I definitely had that, but as I mentioned earlier, any ball-related game was always my first priority and thing that I wanted to do. So when it came to studying time, my mom always tells the story how she just used to hear me up in my room and just hear the ball against the wall, bouncing against the wall all the time. But yeah, got through school. I was lucky to get a professional contract straight out of school. So rugby kind of turned professional.
I had these guys, John Eales, Stephen Larkin, Joe Long, Richard Harry, just amazing legends to run rugby, and the next thing I was playing and training with them, and I think other guys like Timmy Horan, Jason Little, who were just great.
Playing the game and then just fell in love with the game. I think like we all know, the people are very special. There's so many different characteristics about a rugby man or rugby woman these days, and that just sort of engulfed me, and that's when I sort of started playing. I mean, I've always looked at it and still always looked at it. It was one chapter in my life. I went for 18 years, and now I'm in the next chapter, which is the work life, family life, kids, and things like that. So I don't think you can narrow yourself off to just be a sportsman at an early age of say 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, 12, even 17. I think you've always got to be aware that it can come crashing down because you're only one injury away from sort of being in the real world outside that isolated sports bubble that we live in.
For 2 years. I mean, at the under-21 tournament, I also got the Port of Tournament trophy. So I thought, this is the opportunity. Let me go full out for this. Then I actually left the Blue Bulls. I went to a smaller union with Griquas in South Africa. Of course, Cran also was the number 1 at the Blue Bulls at that stage. Yeah, and I became a Springbok out of Griquas. And then I came back to my beloved Blue Bulls. We achieved amazing things with the Blue Bulls in the next 15 years.
So many people who went through that period where the game was going professional. There were lots of things that were happening when you look back now and say, how on earth did that evolve, or how did that work out? So because of that, it was a very easy balance to get. And look, I still didn't think, because of the fact that I had been a solicitor, I still very much was of the view that I was going to play rugby for maybe 1 or 2 years and then go back into that world of work and try and progress there. So it was never an issue.
The momentum he wanted in terms of the success on the field, but he really professionalised that side of the club. He changed the mentality, he brought in all the strength and conditioning elements. Rugby was really still amateur. 96, it was that first sort of professional turning point, and the next few years were a real learning curve, and he helped really move it forward. And then Dean Richards and John Wells, who I played with in my first 2 seasons, then became the coach in '98, and it just seemed to be on a constant trajectory of success from that moment. Martin took over as Martin Johnson took over as
1995, the Rugby World Cup in South Africa, which was just the most glorious celebration. We had a real chance to get through to the latter stages. Unfortunately, due to a loss against France in the group stages, it put us on course to play New Zealand in the quarter-finals, and whilst we made a good fist of it, the simple fact is if we'd gone down another part of the route, another side of the draw, we may well have ended up in the final, and therefore the frustration, I think, was that we were a good team. We were
and outside the stadium, and even midweek matches when we went and had our tour. And yeah, but playing those guys, and great experience, but also understanding what it meant to have played. But they were towards the end of their career when I started playing, and to understand, how important I suppose, the way they played the game, the way they supported the players after the game. We had a view in the dressing shed, you'd swap jerseys. So I suppose all that came with the game of rugby, that sort of epitomised those players, Frank Manuel, Philip Sella and those.
So we didn't have a great understanding or knowledge of any of the other players around the world. Yes, we had a better understanding of the Aussies and a better understanding of the Kiwis, but still not a great understanding of them. We had very little knowledge of that French side, so they were a massive threat to us. And of course, in Durban on that particular day, it absolutely bucketed down. There was water lying on the field. The conditions were treacherous. There were conditions that didn't suit us. I don't think they suited anyone, to be quite honest. And that French team was a team full of flair and running ability and skillful players, as you mentioned. It probably didn't suit them either. But we were concerned, obviously, because in France, I think they were playing the wet a lot more than we were playing in the wet here in South Africa. And it was a massive game. To be quite honest, at the end of the day, we were a tad fortunate to come through that one.
I ended up being the Bristol Colts captain the year after that, and then I ended up going on to be the Bristol Under-21s captain as well. So I was very proud, and I'm sure some of my teammates back then, they've heard me say I'd never play for Bath. Because that was going against everything I stood for.
He played for Newbridge, God bless him, and there was a lot of competition. So I was late getting captain. I was at the age of 26, and my first cap, as you quite rightly said, was against England in '96, and I suppose there was a lot of nervousness about me because it was my first cap, but at the age of 26, I felt I was more than ready. Up to that point, I'd gone on a Royals tour to Namibia and Zimbabwe and played in a B team on tour. I'd been capped at Wales.